Hi, good afternoon. I'll try and make up, ooh, that's attractive. I'll try and make up some time that we lost earlier today. What do others do? I get asked that question pretty much everywhere I go. It's very common. I'm surprised if I don't get asked the question. Regularly people will stop me, whether it's an intended session or just, passing for a cup of coffee. Hey Lacey, I'm thinking of doing this. What do other people do? What else have you seen? So today we're going to pop through a few of the key areas that I get approached about. I think it's important to note though a little bit about me because I'm the strange girl with the pink hair, so this is me. I've been in the industry for 12 years. I was actually so I was the CFO of a waste and recycling group in Queensland who have been highly publicised lately. And I think it's important to note that I'm not an environmentalist, I'm not a scientist, I'm an accountant. And that means that the context that we're going to have and discuss is probably a little different to some of the other topics, and it's actually a little intimidating coming to talk after people with lots of degrees talking about science. So we'll pop through. The areas that I get asked the most about, what do people do, that's not what they want to know. They want to know, how am I doing compared to the next guy? That's what we all want to know, really. How do I do compared to someone else, and should I be doing something differently? Should I be doing better? These are the key areas that we're going to target today, because obviously there's lots of focuses, but generally the number one focus that people have when they speak to me, because I'm an accountant, because I work in technologies, are transaction capture. How should I be tracking things? Am I getting enough information? Am I getting the right information? I've got multiple sites. Some are different. How do I deal with that? How do I deal with tracking information for my regulator? What about the integrity of my data? Can I trust it? Do I know that I've got everything? And the big one that I tend to come across, again, because my background's commercial, is should I be focusing on the money? Should I be focusing on profit? Should I be focusing on the customer, who might be residential or might be commercial, depending on if you're an LGA or if you're a C&D style facility? And then finally, the last one, it's often one that gets the follow-up phone call. What's the story that I should be telling people? We've heard a lot about that today. What is the story that we should sell? What should we promote? How do we get a message out? So we might move on to the first question. So transaction capture comes in different forms. Clearly, at some point, Rockhampton had a public weighbridge, and this is how they captured their data. Now, we don't usually use this anymore. You don't see pre-printed dockets with handwritten notes very often. That is, I think, 1897, so we've come a long way. But you do still see paper transactions happening. Most of the time, though, I would strongly recommend, if you are on a paper base, it's time to go digital. You want to not just track the digital movement of the transaction, though. You can have a point-of-sale system, sure, but there's so much more to know. What do I know about the rubbish coming in? Where did it come from? Where is it going? What do I know about the regulatory piece of that rubbish? Because I'm going to have to tell somebody about it, be it the EPA or the DES or we're in Western Australia. How can I pre-fill that now? I highly recommend that these are the questions you ask when you're looking at your own current transactional systems. Should I automate? Can I have fancy license plate cameras? What does the guy down the road do? Does he have boom gates? Does he have traffic lights? This is not a question you should ask and compare to somebody else. Unless you're comparing to somebody who you're aspiring to be. I had a chat with Michael from Cessnock yesterday. I think a lot of people went and saw his presentation. Great opportunities to put in new functionality, but looking for automation is not about comparing. Looking at automation is about determining what the outcome is that you want to achieve and how you can do so. It also depends on your capital expenditure, the approach you want to take. If you are harnessing, servicing your resident, maybe you don't want to automate. You like to have a smiling customer service person at a window. So all of those are considerations. And if you're asking me, how should I automate and what do other people do, the first thing I'm going to tell you is you should probably stop and consider what your outcome is, not what everybody else is doing. Do other councils integrate into their finance system? That came up this morning. Are some doing it manually? So the conversation this morning was, we're at the weighbridge and we print out all our waste data and we hand it to finance and they then enter a journal. Now, as an accountant, it's lovely that you're entering journals and you're giving finance people information, but every point of transaction that you have to touch is an opportunity for risk. Every time I have to re-enter something, it's an opportunity for someone to make a mistake, enter a typo. If you can integrate into a finance package, be it with a CSV file or a text file or an automated link of some sort, do it. Absolutely do it. It will improve the number of times you have to touch information, it will improve man hours, it will reduce overhead, and it will improve your data integrity, which you're going to come back and ask me about in about 3 slides. Where is the line between finance and operations? So I've had a lot of involvement with, crushing plants and C&D plants and MRFs. There is always that disconnect. Finance people aren't going to know about waste, and as waste councils, which I'm gathering a lot of you are, what happens is we're generally the revenue generator. Next to rates and water, we're where the money comes in. But we get a perception sometimes as being the tip. And the tip shouldn't be a dirty word, but sometimes there's a connotation that goes with that. Make sure you have a clean line between where waste stands and where finance stands and who has what responsibility. If a customer queries a transaction, who's going to handle that? Is it waste, is it finance, and how do you both get involved? If the EPA comes knocking, who's handling that? Non-weighed versus weighed sites. Can I ask for a show of hands? Has anybody here got waste facilities without weighbridges? Cool. Those people, can you leave your hands up for a minute, and then can you drop them if you also have a facility with a weighbridge? Okay, so there's actually quite a lot of you. Now, New South Wales EPA has spent some great quality time targeting those facilities lately, and it's because you're a higher risk. In a non-weighed environment, you want to transact based on the volume of a car, based on the volume of a ute, and they give you a nice little table that you can use to determine that a car weighs 60 kilos and a ute weighs 300 kilos and so forth. If you have a site with a weighbridge, they tell you clearly, you have a weighbridge, you should have a weight, in and out, whether it's a stored tear or otherwise. What happens sometimes is we have a nice single data set, we want to charge the same price at all of our sites, so we just set up the car pricing at the site that has the weighbridge as well. That's going to be an audit risk. They're going to come and look at you. So I'd really love you all who have both weighed and non-weighed sites, when you get home, just double check that you're running 2 data sets. Weighbridge sites very clearly shouldn't be charging by carload. And if you are, and you're a non-weighed site, you also should make sure that you're charging as a whole carload. Because the EPA has done a whole lot of work to make sure that they average out for you that a car weighs 60 kilos. Bob down the road, his car probably weighs 300 kilos, and Mary down the other road, hers probably weighs 10. They've worked out the average of 60 for you. Try to work within those parameters if you can. Disasters are the other thing that comes up quite a bit. I've had a bushfire, I've had a cyclone. North Queensland, cyclones are imminent. And I once had a call from someone whose mayor had called the weighbridge, open the gates. People are coming in with free green waste today. That's great, but we still have to track it. Now, whether that's tracking it via a click counter with the number of transactions that come in, whether it's still transacting with the weighbridge by changing your data set, make sure you have methods in place, because again, if you're a weighed site and you're stopping weighing because the mayor has said let them in, you want to make sure you're not going to be hindered later. There have been cases of New South Wales facilities who ended up paying levy on their disaster waste because they hadn't followed the right process, and it ended up biting them in the end. 3 months worth of conversations and they've come to an agreement, but they're still having to pay for volumetric surveys and pay for all of that lovely pile of stock that's come in that should have been exempt. Finally, should I add a bridge? The site down the road has one. This again, like the automation, entirely up to your needs. If you have 20 transactions a month and you get along really well by recording them with your one operator that comes in 4 days a month, maybe you don't need a weighbridge. Consider that it's going to cost you $130,000 to $180,000 in decks and civil works and the rest of it before you make that decision. I'm going to tell you when you ask, what should I do, to reconsider what the outcome is that you want to achieve. How do I know that my data isn't rubbish? What do other people do? How do they know? Data is like a transfer station. You put rubbish in, you take rubbish out. That's what happens. So the important things here are doing your own internal audits and your own internal checks. Does anybody actually do their own internal audits? You're all councils, of course you do. Thank you. Take the time to check your data. Don't be the council who in 3 years' time after pricing changes finds that their pricing isn't covering their levy contribution, because I've seen that happen too. Make sure you take time, reassess your pricing back to levy, reassess the quality of the data that you're using, because what happens over time is that the weighbridge operator trains the new weighbridge operator who trains the new weighbridge operator. The data administrator trains the new data administrator. We don't take the time sometimes to ensure that the information we're using to generate revenue and report regulatory compliance is actually valid. So go back, take some time, check it out. Telling the story is the next area that I get asked about quite a lot. I've got all this data, and this was a continuation of this morning's conversation with someone. I've got all this data, we've done all this work, we've cleaned it up, we trained the staff, we know that we've checked the data, it's right. I've got so much information, Lacey, it's great. What do I do with it? So there are lots of things you can do, and again, you will have heard a lot of those stories over this week. But just be really clear about what the message is that council actually wants to promote. The comment that someone made to me this morning was they want to promote diversion. Okay, is that diversion from landfill? And if so, what does a community member who reads your newsletter or your flyer or your website know about diversion? You know, you've given them a total tons. What does that mean to them? Why do they care? So maybe make that message instead, this waste stream was diverted and it came from here and went here, and this is what we made of the product. Give them more of a story that you can sell. You can probably already have the data to do so, and if you've cleansed it and made sure it's clean, then you know that it's reliable. Build yourself nice standard reports. How do other councils get their info? They use intelligence tools like Power BI. We've heard about that quite a bit. They also set their own standard reports. Know what your outcome is, set it up so you can press a button. The third weighbridge. So did anybody go and hear Michael talk about his Cessnock new weighbridge? It's pretty cool. Check it out. It's not only at Cessnock. There's a couple of other facilities. Albury is in the process of putting one in. They're doing testing stages. Brisbane City Council's had them for a while. So you've got another measurement point. Telling the story, so being able to tell people about diversion, is about potentially knowing your measurement points. If you have a vehicle that comes in, drops off multiple products and then leaves and weighs out on the way, you know that you had a giant pile of rubbish. What was that made up of? Shove a third weighbridge in the middle of your site and you've got an extra waypoint. Now I can potentially tell what was dropped off at my CRC, not only through my CRC dropoffwaste.com website, but I can also then validate the weight that was involved there. I now have more information and I can tell my community about diversion we're doing and what's making that up. And now is the time to do it, because we are in the media, we are in the spotlight. Harness that. Use the time now, because I don't think I've seen a single person walk past someone with Queensland or Brisbane or Ipswich, branding on them and not ask questions. I don't think I've seen anybody not ask questions about waste coming out of New South Wales into other states, or what are we going to do with China? It is everywhere, everybody's interested. Now is the time to sell your message. I'm potentially making up my time too fast here, aren't I? Excellent. So, the last one we're going to talk about, or the last question we're going to talk about that I get asked, what do other people do, is around how commercial are they? Are they customer focused? And sometimes people that means they're non-commercial, which doesn't have to be the case. Or are they financial focused? So you will have heard earlier from Mark here at Kimbrickie. Kimbrickie have both a customer focus and a financial focus. You can have both. You might choose, though, that council wants a break-even position. We want the best outcome from our council. This is another question. We're asking me what others do. Great question to ask. But you need to understand and go back to your executive team at council. What is the outcome that council wants to achieve? If you want to give mum and dad free services and easy services, maybe home pickup services with no out-of-pocket expense, maybe that's not as much of a financial focus on dollar or revenue. It's got other financial focuses. Maybe you instead want to charge as much as you can and cover the levy and make sure that you're paying for services, because grants aren't a focus. A customer-focused council often will have a lot of grant revenue. Maybe you're not in a position to, so charge more. Again, this is a question that's about what is the outcome council wants to achieve. Go back to that question, then it will help you come to the final answer. So, rather than having questions, because this is a short session to make up some time, I think it's an opportunity for you all. You have the answers. The person sitting next to you probably has the same problem or had the problem and has their own solution. So I highly recommend, talk amongst yourselves. If you have a particular challenge, find the guy that's 3 councils over or the girl that's 3 councils over and say, hey, have you had this problem? What did you do? Because that's the best way that we can get answers, and we're really good at that. This conference is all about sharing what we learn, so I encourage you all to ask questions of each other. Feel free to come and see me too. But yeah, ask questions of each other wherever you can. And I think I've made up about 3 minutes. So if you do have any questions, feel free to grab me later and we'll keep moving on. Thank you.